chapter 33, verse 18. Then Moses said, "Now show me your glory. Now show me your glory." Over the next 2 Sundays, we're going to look at Exodus 13, and we're going to also look at Exodus chapter 40. And based on those 2 texts, I want to ask you, as a church, as a community of faith, as a body of believers, are we desperate for the presence of God? Are we desperate for the presence of God? As a church, as a faith family, are we desperate for the presence of God? You know, it's easy for us to carry on with a religious routine and not be desperate for the living presence and the power of His Spirit. So do we really want a fullness of the presence of God in our midst? Moses says, "Show me your glory." What is His glory? What does it mean? One of the best translations said, the glory of the Lord is the invasion of God's reality into the human sphere. The invasion of God's reality. God is always present, but the thing is, do we realize that He is?
All right.
And let me give some background to our passage on today. After bringing the Israelites out of slavery of Egypt, God had initiated a special relationship with the children of Israel, calling them from all the people of the earth. And He said, "You are going to be my special people, my treasured possession, to be a priestly kingdom, a holy nation." God had given them the 10 Commandments in Exodus 20 and instructions on building the tabernacle in Exodus 25 through 31. And God had even promised to dwell in the midst of the Israelites, and the tabernacle was to be a visible sign of that abiding presence of God. The tabernacle is going to be, as we look at this, a sort of portable Mount Sinai. Just as God's glory rested on the mountain in a cloud, so would God's glory fill the tabernacle.
All right.
And God would be present with the people in a real and material way as they traveled through the desert or the wilderness. The problem, of course, is that by the time we get to Exodus 33, the people had stumbled. For you recall, they had worshipped the golden calf. They betrayed their relationship with God. God had already given them the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not have any graven images. God already told them, thou shalt not have any gods before me. But yet they worshipped a golden calf.
All right.
So we look at Exodus 33. It says God became angry with them. In Exodus 33 verse 1 says this. It said, the Lord said to Moses, "Depart, go up from here, you and the people whom you have brought up out of the land of Egypt, to the land of which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Saying to your offspring, I will give it. I will send an angel before you." An angel. "And I will drive out the Canaanites, the Amorites, the Hittites, Perizzites, and Hivites, and the Jebusites. Go to a land flowing with milk and honey, but I will not go up
All right.
among you, lest I consume you." How many of you know God hates sin? God is a holy God, and He cannot stand sin. So He says, look, I'm going to send an angel instead. For you are a stiff-necked people. And the idea of stiff-neck comes with the idea of an ox plowing a field. And and the person is on the back and trying to guide him in the right direction, but the ox want to go his own way.
All right. Yes.
So that's saying that the ox is being what? Stiff-necked.
All right.
He says, you are a stiff-necked people. So we go down to verse 12. Look at what he says. Then Moses replied to the Lord, see, you say to me, bring up this people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. And you have said, I know you by name, and you have also found favor in my sight. Now therefore, if I have found favor in your sight, please show me your ways.
All right.
That I may know you in order to find favor in your sight. Consider too that this nation is your people. And God said to Moses, my presence will be with you, and I will give you rest. My presence will be with you, and I will give you rest. And Moses responded to God by saying, if your presence will go with me, do not bring up from here, for how shall it be known that I have found favor in your sight, I and your people? If it is not in your going with us, so that you are distinct, I and your people, from every other people on the face of the earth. And the Lord said to Moses, the very thing you have spoken, I will do. For you have found favor in my sight, and I know you by name. Moses said, please show me your glory.
All right.
Let's consider again what's going on. God comes to Moses and says, this land, I promise you it is yours to take, but I will not go with you. Let me ask you a question. A promise of God without the presence of God, would you take it? A promise of God without the presence of God, would you? Let's be careful how we answer. This is exactly the kind of Christianity we have today. Come to Christ and get stuff. Come to Christ and you get forgiveness. You get heaven. You get the best life. But imagine you coming to Christ to get God.
All right.
Let me hear somebody. God is the one whom we need.
All right.
He's the one we want. All of these things flow from God.
All right.
And so the picture that Israel is faced with is the promise of God without the presence of God. And Moses said, Father, no, we must have your presence with us. Why? Why is he desperate for the presence of God? And why must we be desperate for the presence of God? For reasons. Number one, because we have an assignment we cannot fulfill.
All right.
Turn to somebody and say, we have an assignment we cannot fulfill. Moses was divinely called by God, or called to a task of leading the people of God to Canaan. It's not an easy task. His leadership was often called into question, and his orders were disobeyed. Moses had a duty that required faithfulness and dependability.
All right.
He had the task of walking in obedience to the Lord and his will. Now, can you imagine how Moses must have felt? He had done his best to lead them to follow the Lord's will, and still all they did was complain and find fault and sin against the Lord. There must have been many times when Moses said, you know what? I quit. I'm tired. I'm through.
All right.
And he felt there was a discrepancy between what God is calling him to do and the resources he had available to accomplish it. Do you ever feel that way? As parents, do you ever feel like what you have been called to do, you can't do? Wives, husbands, singles, students, children, everything. The Christian life is like this. It's designed to be like this.
Amen.
There's not one thing in the Christian life that God calls us to do that we, with our own resources, are able to do. Can I get a witness in here?
Amen.
Everything demands, requires his presence.
Amen.